Good afternoon, welcome to NMS. Let's tackle the issue of carbohydrate cycling from a standpoint of, should you do low carbohydrates on a rest day and high carbohydrates on a training day? And I want you to look at it from a point of view of when you're using those carbohydrates stored in the muscles as glycogen, which is very similar to starch, by the way, you're using carbohydrates that you've stored in there from hours to days earlier, okay? So you're not just using carbohydrates you ate from an hour or two ago, and you don't just replenish those carbohydrates from the carbohydrates you have after a workout. But certainly those carbohydrates you eat after the workout is very much going to go towards replenishing glycogen stores. But your glycogen stores are quite vast and they keep you going for long periods of time. And to replace those, it takes hours to days after to replenish that. So when thinking in terms of, okay, so if I'm going to be using carbohydrates that I've been storing for days, should I not eat carbohydrates on my rest days? The answer is no, you need to eat carbohydrates on your rest days because you've got to replenish those stores. Now, fat loss doesn't just happen from, okay, on a rest day you eat less carbohydrates and then you burn more calories on another day, and so therefore you're burning more calories and more fat and then losing more fat. Fat loss is a total of all the work you're doing over a period of time, in 24 hours, to days. So maybe on days where you're resting, you're not burning as many calories and therefore you're probably not using as much fat. But then on work days, you go and you burn more fat. So it's really an amalgam of all the calories that you've been ingesting over many days. And if you're in a net negative balance over many days, you're losing fat. If some days you're high and some days you're low, okay, but overall you're in a net positive balance, you're not going to lose fat. So really it comes down to what is my calorie consumption, what is my carbohydrate consumption, and also it comes down to, well, if you're eating a slightly reduced carbohydrate diet because you're doing a cut, for example, then you're going to be using every ounce of those carbohydrates to replenish the carbohydrates in your muscles, the glycogen stores, and in the liver, okay? And you're never going to replenish them fully because you're not eating as much carbohydrates. So does it really matter if you're having almost zero carbohydrates on a rest day and then eating it on a day you train? Well, no, and in actual fact, you're probably going to hinder your training on that training day, okay? Because you're not having enough carbohydrates in general over the course of a week. So what I suggest that you do is I want you to go back and have a look at your approach to this, because I know for myself, when I'm trying to cut, I've cut back my carbohydrates in general and I'm losing body fat. But if I cut my carbohydrates back on my rest days, I'm not recovering, and therefore on my training days I don't have the energy to put into a big workout, and then I'm not recovering from that workout, so my strength loss strength starts to be sort of diminished for the fact that I don't have enough carbohydrates to fuel my workouts. Now, carbohydrates have been looked at as a very bad sort of macronutrient. Oh yes, it contributes to fat, but the majority of the fat storage that you have comes from the actual fats that you eat. So if I was going to do anything, I would reduce my fat intake on my rest days and still have a little bit of carbohydrates, because then I'm replenishing what my muscles are using, but I'm not giving my body fats that it can now potentially store. But once again, it comes down to carbohydrate intake, calorie intake, and total intake. So just like protein, try and have a very similar amount on training days and rest days. Maybe you just don't have as much as a replenishment carbohydrate because when you're not training, you just have regular meals with carbohydrates in them. I hope that helps you, and I sort of hope that sort of explains to you the whole relationship of carbohydrates in your body, because I think a lot of people get this one wrong, and because they get it wrong, they they do hinder their performance in the gym when they probably don't have to hinder it. Thanks for listening, guys. I hope you got something out of this video. Like, comment, share. I do love the comments. Obviously not everyone's going to agree with me, but if they don't want to agree with me, at least make a logical argument as to why you think that you might be right and I may be wrong. We're not always all right, but that doesn't mean that I can't, give you the chance to explain your side of it. I'll explain my side of it, and maybe we'll come to a better understanding. Thanks for listening, guys, and I hope you appreciate my videos.